The wheels touched down in Melbourne just as the sky shifted from pale pink to gold, and for a moment I thought the pilot had flown us into a different hemisphere of reality rather than simply across the Pacific. The cabin doors opened, warm air rushed in, and that familiar American reflex kicked in, the instinct to brace, to hurry, to stay alert. But the terminal felt slow, unrushed. People walked with soft footsteps, not the clipped, defensive pacing you hear in LAX or GFK. Even the announcements sounded gentler, like they were inviting you rather than commanding you. I remember standing in line at passport control, ready for the usual intensity, when the officer glanced at my form, smiled, and said, "Long flight, huh? You'll be right. Welcome to Oz." It threw me off more than it should have. Back home, that kind of warmth from an authority figure feels rare enough to be suspicious. Here, it seemed natural. Outside, the sun sat lower in the sky than I expected, casting long shadows across the airport road. Cars were moving on the left, which my brain refused to accept even as I watched it happen. The Uber driver waved from the wrong side of the car, eager and cheerful, and my hand twitched toward the passenger door I'm used to, only to find the wheel staring back at me. Everything looked familiar, yet flipped, like someone had taken my mental map of North America and turned it over in their hands. On the drive into the city, the quiet struck me hardest. No horns, no engines revving, just the hum of tires on pavement and the occasional magpie warble drifting through the open window. My driver chatted casually about foodie season and the heat wave expected later in the week, and I kept nodding, still trying to decode the simple calm of it all. In the States, silence usually meant tension. Here, it felt like the world had exhaled and forgotten to inhale again. My first real jolt came at a crosswalk. The car actually stopped early, gently, and the driver waved a pedestrian through with a small smile. Not out of obligation, not out of fear of a ticket, but out of instinct. I stepped onto the sidewalk, realizing the unsettling truth. Australia didn't run on urgency. It didn't run on pressure. It didn't seem to run at all, not in the way America does. Instead, it flowed. And as I watched the sunset roll across the Yarra River, I felt my own rhythm stutter. Unsure whether to fight this upside-down calm or fall into it, I didn't fully understand how disoriented I was until my third day in Australia, standing in line at a cafe, trying to order a simple coffee. Flat white. The barista offered with a grin, as if reading my confusion. I nodded, pretending I knew what that meant. In America, coffee is function. In Australia, it's a craft. Every order felt like a ritual. No one was rushing. No one grabbed to-go cups like lifelines. People sat, even before work. They sipped slowly and looked out windows, as if mornings were for savoring, not surviving. At the office, things didn't pick up the pace. I was here on a 3-month cross-company project, expecting the same energy I'd grown up in: late nights, Slack messages at midnight, endless meetings that bled into lunch. But my Aussie colleagues had a different tempo entirely. Meetings started with casual banter. "How ya going?" Wasn't small talk. It was genuine, and you were expected to actually answer. At 5:01 p.m. on my first Friday, the office was empty. Not winding down. Empty. I asked someone where everyone went. She laughed and said, "Home, mate. It's the weekend," as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Back home, logging off on time could feel like disloyalty. Here, working late earned you raised eyebrows and quiet concern. It was around week 2 when the cost of living shock hit me like a freight train. A regular grocery run left me blinking at a $40 receipt for what looked like 2 meals and a bottle of oat milk. I messaged a friend back in Seattle. Everything here costs double, but as I walked home with my tiny, reusable bag of food, I noticed something. The streets were spotless. People picked up after their dogs. Cars actually paused before pedestrian crossings. And nobody was yelling into a phone. The emotional whiplash came in public spaces. In the US, my instincts were sharpened. Don't sit with your back to the door. Keep your bag zipped. Know where the exits are. But here, kids left scooters outside cafes. Beach towels sat unguarded while their owners swam. I left my sunglasses on a park bench once, fully expecting never to see them again. 2 hours later, they were still there, folded neatly next to a stranger's note that read, "Thought you might come back. Cheers." Even the social rules flipped. I'd been invited to a Saturday barbie and showed up with a 6-pack and a side dish like any good American guest. But everyone else brought their own meat. Not as a potluck, but because that's just how it's done. Bio isn't just about drinks, it's about equality, about not burdening the host. That night, we stood barefoot on grass, eating grilled prawns under string lights while someone passed around lamingtons and teased me for saying restroom instead of loo. What unsettled me wasn't that things were worse or better. It was that they weren't mine. The habits I'd built over decades didn't apply here. My timing, my humor, my idea of normal was off just enough to keep me unsure of myself. I kept reaching for behaviors that didn't land, like throwing a punch in a dream and watching it move in slow motion, but then, something cracked open. On the train one morning, an elderly man tapped my shoulder. I panicked, thinking I'd done something wrong. But he just said, "Mate, you dropped this," and handed me a coin that had rolled under my seat. He smiled like it was nothing. But to me, it was the turning point. The first moment I felt like this country didn't just tolerate me. It saw me. It started with my breath. I wasn't holding it anymore. Somewhere between forgetting to lock my backpack and realizing I hadn't checked my work email all weekend, I noticed I had stopped bracing for impact. That low-level hum of stress I'd carried since college, always scanning, always tensing, always optimizing, had faded into something quieter. A kind of ease I didn't recognize as myself. Australia hadn't changed me all at once. It chipped away slowly, patiently. At first, I kept trying to fix things. Why did no one text back right away? Why did stores close so early? Why wasn't there more urgency, more ambition, more drive? But as weeks passed, I started to understand this wasn't a broken version of the American system. It was a completely different operating manual, and the biggest shift came not in the big cultural shocks, but in the smallest ones. Like when a coworker brought in homemade banana bread just because. No fanfare, no announcement, just a Tupperware and a sticky note that said, "Help yourself," or when a stranger offered me sunscreen on a hiking trail without asking why I hadn't brought my own. But the moment that sealed it came during a late evening walk in a Brisbane neighborhood. The air was thick with summer, cicadas buzzing in the trees. I watched as a group of kids rode their bikes past me, no helmets, no parents trailing nervously behind. One of them waved, not because they knew me, just because. That's when I realized the safety I felt wasn't just physical. It was social. It was emotional. I wasn't just unafraid of being mugged, I was unafraid of being judged, of being in the way, of being too much or too little. Australia, in its relaxed, teasing, barefoot way, had shown me what it meant to exist without constantly needing to prove something. Of course, there were still moments I missed home. I missed the boldness of American expression, the way people say exactly what they mean. I missed the hustle, sometimes the clarity of a culture that always pushes forward. And I missed New York bagels with a vengeance. But what I didn't miss was the tension, the performance, the weight, because once you live somewhere that doesn't run on fear or burnout, you start to question how much of your personality was really just survival. I didn't need to be on all the time here. I didn't need to hustle for belonging. People invited me into their lives without conditions. Not because I was interesting or useful or strategic, but because that's what you do. You include. You relax. You share. Leaving Australia felt like waking from a dream you didn't realize was healing you. At the airport, the woman checking my bag asked if I'd enjoyed my stay. I told her I didn't want to leave. She smiled and said, "That means you're taking the good bits home with you." And I did. Now, back in the US, I walk a little slower. I let people merge in traffic. I stop checking emails after dinner. And sometimes when I cross a street and a car doesn't slow down, I still instinctively wait for that gentle wave that says, "Go on, mate," because once you've lived life upside down and realized it's not upside down at all, it's hard to go back to thinking your old way was the only way. You carry the difference with you, quietly, proudly, like a secret only the open-hearted get to keep.